Continuing with the recording industry, we see a familiar face here on slide 27 when we talk about reel to reel. Um, when I was growing up in my teens, we would have some of these small tape recorders at home, and I would go out and I'd buy a reel of tape and I would record myself talking to a friend. Then I would um, package this up in a padded envelope and send it to another city where I had a friend, and that person would put it on his or her tape recorder and listen to my message. And it's kind of funny to think that we did that, but long distance phone calls were very expensive back then, sometimes $3 to $4 a minute. So I could do this and record a half hour, an hour, whatever I wanted to, and send it. And in 2 days, yeah, the mail was very fast back then. In 2 days, my friend would have my recording, and I would not have to spend a small fortune on a telephone call. So that was really neat. Then we have this effects were created. Excuse me a second. Tape recorders led to effects, so you could do neat things with sounds. Like I could do neat things with this photo booth, this videotape. I could make my face go. I could, crunch myself up. All kinds of things I could do. I could change the color, but here we had some interesting flanging. Was a whooshing, swirling sound. It was developed by John Lennon of the Beatles by alternately pressing the tape flangers on two machines. Let's see if I can get you to hear what this sounded like. Hang in there. Let's go and listen. Oh, darn. The video is unavailable, so I can't do that, but I have another. Just hang in there. I've got another one that might be working. Another example of flanging. Let's see if YouTube will accommodate me now. Here we go. Okay.
Does anyone know what flanging is?
You know, fool know, tell us, Mr. Audio. Flanging was first created using analog tape recorders. Here's how. The signal from the mixing console is routed through two identical tape machines, meaning that both machines ran at the same speed and had the same distance between the record and play heads. The signal was recorded on both recorders at the record heads and played back a fraction of a second later at the play heads. This produced a delay, but no flanging. The flanging happened when the engineer put his thumb on the flange of the supply reel of one of the tape recorders. This is how flanging gets its name. Lightly putting a thumb on the flange momentarily slowed down the signal from that tape recorder and created time delays with the signal from the machine that wasn't slowed down. These time delays caused a phase cancellation that moved through the frequency spectrum and created that jet plane sound that people recognize as flanging. Today, flanging can be created using a signal processor or a plug-in, and is much easier to do, but still has the same sound of the original flanging using tape. Thanks, Mr. Audio.
For more interesting facts about sound, visit Mr. Audio at soundimages.com.
Thank you, Mr. Audio. Okay. You don't have to know anything about what flanging is or does. Just know that today things can be done electronically or digitally, where back, in the 50s and 60s, they had to actually, smush the tape or do something with their hands. We had reverb. It simulates reverberation of various sizes of rooms. Delay. It repeats an original sound at regular intervals. Echo. You know what an echo is? Okay. You don't need to know all of these. I just want you to know that we went from manually making sound effects to digitally doing the sound effects. And some of the biggest names in the recording industry were involved in that. Now we come to something that is important for you, and it's called Battle of the Speeds, which is on slide 29. In 1948, Columbia Records introduces the 33 and a third long playing record, what we called the LP for long playing. That started the battle of the speeds for format dominance. We knew something was going to win out. Soon the 33 and a third becomes preferred format for albums, something that you can do on a CD, a DVD. You can get all the songs of an album on, something smaller than this. The 45 was the choice for single hits, and you'd have the A side, the big hit. The big hit was on what was called side A, and then side B, a lot of times it never went anywhere. But when you had a group like the Beatles, you had two hits. You had an A side hit and a B side hit. And then we had the older 78 RPM, revolutions per minute format, quietly disappeared. All right, so we ended up with the 45 and the 33 and a third. And in the 1950s, stereo players debut, which quickly doubles the number of records being sold. People loved the stereo sound. You had sound coming from speakers or amps on different sides. You could turn one down, you could hear the music coming out of this speaker and that sort of thing. It was cool, very cool. Then we have famous people like Les Paul, who was one of the greatest guitarists of all time. His career started at the age of 13, and by the early 1950s, he was the greatest jazz guitarist of his generation. As an inventor, Mr. Paul's breakthrough creation of the solid body electric guitar paved the way for electric music and made the sound of rock and roll possible. He was really an innovator, Les Paul. And a little bit more about him. In 1953, while performing with Bing Crosby, he perfected the first multi-track recording machine. This was what I was telling you about. If you had the alto, the bass, the tenor, the soprano, they didn't all have to sing at one time. You could put each one on a track of its own and then blend them together. It allowed separate lines of instrumental music and vocals to be blended together. His many recording innovations, including sound on sound, overdubbing, reverb effects, and multi-tracking, greatly accelerated the advancement of studio recording. So, Les Paul, one of the greatest jazz guitarists of all time, worked with Bing Crosby, came up with the multi-track recording system. Okay. We go to 32, rock and roll. Rock and roll, a blend of jazz, rhythm, and blues, country western, and popular music, debuted in the 1950s. R&R, rock and roll, now a very profitable format, takes a more wholesome and commercial track in the late 1950s, early 60s. In 1964, the Beatles spearheaded an upbeat sound from Britain. Later, other sounds such as folk and Motown create more diversity. Motown was Gordy Berry created Motown Records, and this was for the African American stars, and there were many. Most of them recorded on Motown. 64, the Beatles came here with I Want to Hold Your Hand. Um, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I Saw Her Standing There. Write those down. Those were the two first Beatles tremendous hits. I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I Saw Her Standing There.